And we are going to, and we're sort of getting into the home stretch here now, and that we're in our last BEC chapter, chapter 6. And just taking a look at some of the content for chapter 6, there's a discussion of process management here. This is a fairly light area, about 3 points on the exam. And I am going to ask you to look at the pre-recorded lecture from Becker on this. Pretty much definitional stuff, and I don't want to really kind of bog down our discussion tonight going through a series of definitions, although we will be using a lot of definitions for this last sections or last 5 sections or whatever of the chapter here, dealing with IT. Don't sleep on this stuff, guys. This is a 10-point area. So I want us to get into that. We're going to start here right now with module 2 so that we keep the theme of IT discussion going. Again, look at that module 1 on your own. And in a couple of sessions that we have left, we will go ahead and wrap up chapter 6 tonight. Tomorrow, not tomorrow, but next week we'll wrap up chapter 6. And that will leave us some time to do a final review as you head into your exam. Please make sure, guys, as we head into the completion of the class, I'm sort of preaching the choir here. It looks like I'm going to be sending some emails tonight, understanding what folks are thinking about completing the class successfully if you're not coming to class. But notwithstanding that, I will be looking for everyone at your homework progress. So please don't put me in a world where I'm looking and I'm seeing that nothing was done. That's going to cause a problem. Okay, so make sure that you're keeping up. And I'm not expecting you to be just perfect with everything, but I do expect you have be made, appropriate progress as we head into the end of the class. Okay. All right. So with all that, let's go ahead. And as I said, I'd like to jump to module 2 here. Again, don't forget to look at the Becker pre-recorded lecture, but you turn over to this page 17, where we have this discussion of IT governance. And that will really be the theme here as we go through and continuing to talk about IT tonight and next time. Okay, so let's just go ahead and just some very basic things. The role of information technology in companies, and basically it is a tool that is to support all business processes. Now, when we talk about IT governance, okay, and IT governance outlines how leadership accomplishes the delivery of mission-critical business capabilities using IT strategies. So obviously, we're talking high level of the organization. These days, all entities, are going to utilize information technology. And so IT governance really is at a very high level in the organization. We're talking about board of directors type of responsibility. So you can go ahead and flashcard that. Okay, now we take a look, and I'm not sure that you necessarily need a graphic for that, but let's just take a look at some of the key aspects of a strong key components of a strong IT governance structure. Okay, let's just go ahead and flashcard those. Okay, so when we think about an IT governance structure, we're talking about that the systems must be available to users. Okay, obviously they have to be available in a secure format. Okay, we talk about the architecture, which talk about the job roles, IT applications, hardware supporting those software. We talk about metadata, describing other data known as metadata, where data dictionaries must be robust, okay, and for them to be useful. There has to be strong IT policy, quality, data integrity. Quality are crucial to ensure basic standards are met. So there are no anomalies such as missing data, duplicate values, etc. Right? If we don't have quality data, then our analysis is not going to be very useful to us. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Regulatory compliance.
Okay.
I dared to touch a chord, and I think that means that you will not have video of me tonight, but you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to mess with trying to bring the video back because that often involves a whole bunch of problems. And so I'm just going to accept that we don't have the video tonight. Okay. So I apologize for that. But information collected and stored by an organization is considered personal, identifiable informational, such as personal health information, et cetera. And that is governed to a large extent. You probably heard the abbreviation HIPAA before. So if we're in that sort of a business, then we're going to have to comply with whatever those regulatory requirements are. And then security, and this is really, a big deal these days with all of the issues with hackers and cyber terrorism and all that sort of stuff that we've been seeing in the news. So flashcard these components, these elements of your corporate governance. Now, when we look at governance frameworks, okay, coming over and just taking a look at these frameworks, and there are a few organizations that have provided us with a framework, okay, just taking a look. We have understood COSO, internal control framework, from earlier classes. If you've been taking the auditing course with me, you've heard COSO talked about there. And of course, we can apply that to internal control. This organization, ISACA's control objectives for information related technology, abbreviated COBIT. And then there's also this I don't know how to pronounce this, I guess, Axlos, Information Technology Infrastructure Library. These three frameworks that you sort of see depicted here in this puzzle then fit in with the organizational practices. So let's just go ahead and let's start to take a look at some of these different organizations here and understand what they tell us about what we should have in our structure. So we're going to go ahead and start with COSO. And COSO has an integrated internal control framework, and it covers more than just IT, right? But let's tease out some of the parts of COSO that are relevant to IT, and let's go ahead and flashcard those. So there's a 5-point internal control that we talked about in an earlier class. We have the control environment, we have the risk assessment, we have the control activities, we have the information communication, and then we have the monitoring, and then remember that feeds back into the control environment. Within those 5 categories, there are 17 different principles. Remember, we talked about that, right? So what we're going to tease out is a couple of those principles that we are saying here are particularly relevant to IT, and we're going to flashcard these, okay? So control activities, principle 11 of the framework, 17 that fall within the 5 components, right? Number 11, control activity to achieve organizational objectives, and we look at the notion of general controls, okay? General controls are controls like use of passwords, disaster recovery, things that are not controls that are specific to a certain application, like payroll or something, are called general controls, okay? And to establish these controls, the company must understand the dependency between the general controls over technology and the use of technology in the business process, okay? So let's just flashcard that is a key part of our control activities. And you can see, guys, just by some of the things that I listed, and I don't know that you need to put these on a flashcard, but we have what? Things like infrastructure, security management, all of our disaster recovery, our acquisition of software and whatnot that we may be using, okay? Then for our information and communication component, okay, principle 13 The framework states that organizations should acquire, create, and use quality information to support the internal control. Okay, so that means capturing both external and internal sources of data relevant to data into useful information and maintaining the quality of that data. So information systems, the information communication, flashcard that's more relevant to the information. And then, of course, we have the communication, and it is important that the different personnel in the entity understand their responsibility as it relates to the controls for IT purposes, and that includes the board of directors. So you can flashcard that. Okay, so key aspects of COSO, now just teasing out some that we've already really talked about, but we're just making sure we're understanding how those are relevant to our IT environment. Okay, now we talked about a couple of other organizations here, ISACA and the COBIT framework. Okay, not COVID, but COBIT framework. And we take a look, and you can see going over to the next page, we talk about governance stakeholders. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that. And when we talk about governance stakeholders, guys, you can go ahead and flashcard that we're going to talk about both two levels. We're going to be talking about the board of directors, essentially, okay, and management. Okay, you can go ahead and flashcard that, but let's just go ahead and take a look. And they tell us that the COBIT distinguishes between governance, which is the board of management, board of directors. Let me just go ahead and I'll put that in parentheses also, governance. Okay, but when we talk about governance, we're probably talking about the board of directors, right? Okay, those charged with governance and management, recognizing them as two unique disciplines that exist for different reasons and require different sets of organizational resources. Okay, so when we talk about governance, we're talking about what? We're talking about the board of directors. Okay, and they are going to be parts of the board of directors, committees, audit committees, executive committees, marketing committees that are going to be involved in that. Okay, management, on the other hand, which is going to be individuals like our chief financial officer, our chief operating officer, obviously the CEO, et cetera, right? All the leaders of management is responsible for the daily planning and administration of the company operations. Okay, so just understand that when we talk about corporate shareholder, corporate governance shareholders, we're talking about board of directors, we're talking about management. And I don't think that you necessarily need a flashcard to talk about what each of these do. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, good. Just by the heading of board of directors and governance. Come over and let's take a look at the next item here, which is information technology infrastructure library framework. And when we take a look at this organization now and some of the things that they have told us, that they have called out for us, we just want to take a look at some of the information that I have over here for that. Okay. We are going to be talking about, sorry guys, set of material that I want to look at for this one. Okay, and when we look at this organization, and they tell us here that this organization, I think it's a British entity, okay, and it is now globally recognized IT governance framework that is more focused on the delivery of IT services across the following 4 domains. So it is, you know, a private firm that does this Axelos, I don't know how to pronounce it. But let's just go ahead and flashcard some of the things that are considered by this organization, which are the organization's people. Okay, excellence in labor practice, information and technology. Okay, and this domain covers the IT resources required to deliver products and services, including data hardware, software, the partners and suppliers. Okay, we considered that dimension, and then value streams and processes encompasses the way in which separate parts of the business work together to deliver products and services. So flashcard those three organizations, some of the key elements of what they talk to us about are listed there, and you can just go ahead and flashcard those on the off chance that you get a question about that specific type of guidance that is there. Okay. All right, good. Now, aligning IT governance with the organization's objectives. Okay, we start with our vision. Okay, and vision is usually articulated in a mission statement of some sort. Okay, and then what we will do in the discussion of the mission statement, the vision statement, and whatnot, then we will go ahead and align our corporate strategy, of course, with our vision, and then the chosen corporate governance strategy must be supported by the appropriate IT strategy and IT governance. So it all links to our vision, our corporate strategy, and then looking to see that we will have the corporate governance that will align our IT strategy and IT governance with the overall chosen strategy of the company. Okay, now let's come over and we start to look at some of these key elements. And why don't you go ahead and flashcard, okay, at a high level, the IT factors that may impact a company's corporate strategy. I don't know that we need, again, I think they're overdoing it with some of these graphics here, but just come over and let's take a look at what some of the elements are that are called out in that graphic. And I want you to flashcard these first at a high level. There are 5 elements here. I want you to flashcard the 5 elements. Okay, and you start to take a look here, and we have availability of IT personnel, virtual and physical network design, cybersecurity, centralized and decentralized network design, disaster recovery, and business continuity. And so you can see that we have the 5 elements that I want you to flashcard at a high level. And then we're going to go in and take a little closer look at some of these. I'm going to ask you to flashcard some of the things that are particularly relevant to some of these, okay, just so you can kind of understand a little bit better. Now, I think that availability of IT personnel is self-explanatory, so I don't think we need to elaborate much more on that. But let's take a look at some of this virtual and physical networks. And they tell us that networks can be physical or virtual, centralized or decentralized. And of course, you could have a combination. Now, we say here that for companies that have consistent power needs. When we say power, I don't think we mean electricity power here. We mean power, computing power, right? Okay, so if you have a consistent power needs, it would make sense to invest in a physical network with equipment on site, referred to as on-premise or on-perm, as there is usually more cost-effective over the long term to meet the demands. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard that you would use what you would use a strategy that you have constant needs. You would have a physical network, right? Consistent power needs. You would use a physical network. Conversely, for companies that have varying demands, intermittently experience sharp spikes, it would be more appropriate to have access to virtual computing power to save cost. Okay, so flashcard that just so you understand when you would use the virtual versus the physical. Okay, now coming over with cybersecurity, and again, I think we understand the notion of cybersecurity. We're going to talk later about components, firewalls, that sort of thing. But just so that we're understanding that this is particularly relevant to, say, healthcare organizations subject to HIPAA regulations and whatnot. There are going to be obviously more concern if you're holding, personal data of customers, et cetera. Okay. Now you come over and centralized versus decentralized. And you can see here that those with a range of locations may prefer a decentralized, okay, in case one entity fails or something that's not going to affect all the entities. If controls are more a concern as opposed to temporary loss of connectivity, then a centralized design may be more advantageous, and you can flashcard that. Okay, so for these things, we want that 5 elements, high-level flashcard, and then for some of those things that are maybe a little less obvious as to what we're talking about, I've asked you to give some flashcards as to how you would decide between virtual versus physical, centralized versus decentralized. Okay, now the other element that goes beyond the 5 here that we need to consider are the support functions. Okay, so support functions include human resources, marketing, legal, internal audit, among others. So you just go ahead and flashcard the nature, the elements of what we're considering support functions, just so you remember that we consider these support functions to the IT. Okay, good. Now, structuring IT governance. And again, we're going to be talking about, when we talk about IT governance, we're going to be talking at a high level. We are talking the board of directors. So let's just come over and see what they tell us about the board of directors. And I find all these graphics just a little annoying. It was like they were trying to pretty up the book so much that they kind of, I think, put a bunch of graphics in here that to me don't give me anything that I can really take away with that are going to really help us to understand this material any better. But anyway, the board must evaluate IT governance policies to ensure they meet the strategic and operational needs of the organization. And we've already talked about that we have also management, and management is responsible, of course, for a tone at the top, as is to a large extent the board of directors for that tone at the top, but the board of directors is at a higher level. Of course, they're going to be hiring the management. And then we have the middle management, and they are more responsible, obviously, for the day-to-day carrying out of policies and making sure subordinates are doing the same. Okay, let's go ahead and let's flashcard some of the elements of the IT support staff here. And again, these can just be at a very high level. I don't know that you have to put all this detail on your flashcards, but obviously strategic or executive IT level staff are those that are responsible for daily planning of governance policies and carrying out those policies. Okay, we have network engineers. They are responsible for designing and maintaining the company's network. Help desk support, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Cybersecurity staff are responsible for protecting us from having our data breached, right? Having our system breached. And then function-specific staff, and these would be specific roles: telephone, application programming, database management, etc. Okay, so you can flashcard the IT support functions, staff, and you can do that at a high level, and you can provide as much as you think you need to on the flashcards here to make sure you understand what these different pieces do. Now, where I definitely want flashcards where they start talking about the accountant's role, because don't forget, guys, even though we're sort of in the weeds here of IT stuff, we are accountants, right? This is a CPA exam, so I would imagine they would probably want us to understand something about the important role in the IT governance that accounting plays, because data that is handled is often sensitive information. such as banking records, financial information, etc. Okay, so when we look at the accountant's roles, and let's flashcard these, okay, they are stewards of accounting information, okay, the primary user of the accounting information system, and they should provide input in the system development so that the IT governance best practices are implemented while also providing maximum application versatility. Coming over, they should be members of project development teams so that project, if we're implementing a new IT project, it's considering the accounting elements, and then they would be involved as testers. Okay, so flashcard those roles of accountants, and then of course there are the end users and their roles, and then of course there are external stakeholders that we need to consider. For example, our very customers could be considered external stakeholders. Okay, good. Come over and let's just take a look at the process for governance execution. Okay, and they tell us here that organizations often employ project development teams for new projects and steering committees for ongoing oversight. Okay, so we're going to have a IT project that we're maybe going to be taking on. We will have a project team for that, and then to continue to see that that is continuing on and meeting up with our corporate strategy and whatnot, we will have a steering committee. Okay, so flashcard that project development team and what steering committee, and then let's go ahead and understand some of the responsibilities of the project development team. Okay, and project development team is formed for a new IT project. Members typically include management, IT, system personnel, accountants, and system users, and we've already seen that it would be expected that the accountants would be involved in that. And this team is responsible for project planning, tracking, IT infrastructure design, change management, and monitoring project performance. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard that right there. That talks about what the responsibilities are of the project planning team, project development team. And then you can see some of the tasks. I don't know that we need to flashcard these, but obviously, managing risk and escalating issues that cannot be resolved within the team would be an important responsibility. But I think we kind of lay out some of their responsibilities there and that up there that I just asked you to flashcard here. Okay, now we understand the project team, but we also have the steering committee. Okay, and the steering committee is an executive level information system, also known as project steering committee, is responsible for oversight of the information system function. This committee consists of high level management and experts and include some of those individuals that are involved with that. Okay, so let's just see what the steering committee does in its oversight role, and let's go ahead and flashcard some of those things. And you can see that they develop and communicate strategic goals, review the IT budget, provide ongoing guidance. Okay, providing ongoing guidance and addressing big picture issues, ensuring management engagement and participation, monitoring the project development team's progress. So those are more of an ongoing, as opposed to the notion of having a project team that is there at the initiation. Okay, and you can see that they tell us that due to the authority level of members, the steering committee has a more holistic view of the enterprise than the project team does. So they're really the ones that are connecting everything up to the overall strategy of the company, and they would be responsible for facilitating coordination and integration. And you take a look at assessing IT governance risks and a business impact analysis. Okay, BIA identifies the business units, departments, and processes that are essential to the survival of an entity, as well as the organizational impact in the event of failure or disruption. And so we're going to be taking a look at some of the things here that the BIA will be doing, what some of their objectives are. And the BIA will identify how quickly essential business units and process can return to full operation following a disaster. Okay, so flashcard that. But this is pretty important because, as we unfortunately have learned, is it's not a question of if, but when the bad thing will happen, right? And so we don't want to sit there and not have these things thought through by this this business impact analysis process. So the objective of the BIA are as follows, and let's just go ahead and flashcard the objectives is to estimate the quantitative financial impact of the organization, assuming a worst case scenario, estimate the qualitative impact, considering that worst case scenario, and then identify the organization, business units, and processes, and estimated recovery timeframes. So, right, when that bad thing happens, then we are in position to quickly address that. Okay, and you say, well, gee, that's kind of negative, John. Why do you say when it happens? Unfortunately, that's what we learned, right? Especially with what happened with COVID a few years back. We're still we're still recovering from COVID to a large extent. So the first step in assessing the risk is to identify what IT resources exist and can determine the base resources needed to sustain minimum operations. We're going to inventory all our IT assets, and then we're going to consider that the following items are documented: when something was placed in service, what are its costs, are we having any warranties, insurance, etc. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to flashcard those because I think those are pretty obvious things that would be necessary for some sort of recovery. Now, we come over and you start to take a look at how we will evaluate the different impact and likelihood of risks. Okay, so let's look at the impact consideration first. And when we look at impact, something is considered high impact if the entity cannot operate without the resource, may experience a high recovery of cost, and may fail to meet the organization's objective and maintain its reputation. Go ahead and flashcard that. Moderate impact are defined as what could partially function, maybe for a week or so, may experience some cost for recovery, and we may fail to meet the organization's objectives. And then low impact, okay, under low impact could operate for extended period and may notice an effect on achieving the organization's objectives or maintaining its reputation. Now, we look at those impacts, and then we look at them in terms of their likelihood. High likelihood means that what? It's got a good chance of happening. Medium, okay, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. Low likelihood means that it's improbable. Okay, now you come over, and if you consider both high impact and high likelihood, then what does that mean? That means that if you had a situation like that, you'd have to take actions, and you would have to take immediate action for those things that are high impact, high probability. So we would have to take an immediate action for something like that. If we are looking and we're seeing that something is medium action, say something is maybe a medium, then we would go ahead and maybe take a delayed action, but we eventually would implement some sort of corrective action. And if something is low risk, low impact, I should say low likelihood, then potentially we would not have to take any action at all. So you come over and we talk about how we would implement that, and they kind of give you this graph. Actually, you know what? This graphic actually is pretty good. So let's just go ahead. Let's flashcard that. That's actually pretty good. So you can go ahead and flashcard that, copy that if that's not already in your flashcards. But you can see, which I was sort of articulating verbally here a minute ago, if something's high impact, high likelihood, you need to take what? Immediate action to put some controls in place around that, right? Okay, so let's see how we will implement the response here. And let's go ahead and flashcard some of these, okay, and identify mitigation recommendations, okay, then evaluate mitigation recommendations, do a cost benefit analysis of those, and then choose the plan and implement it. And notice, guys, we start getting into our risk management stuff that we talked about in an earlier chapter, which is what? Accept the risk, transfer the risk, maybe getting some sort of insurance or something, or mitigate the risk, put something in place that will reduce the likelihood of the event occurring. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard 1, 2, 3, 4, and then choose, plan, and implement. And what are the different things that we can do? We can accept the risk, we can transfer the risk, or mitigate the risk. Okay, good. So with all that, let's go ahead and let's take a look at our first question tonight and see how we do here with this one. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this question. And they're asking us here about the steering committee. And okay, most of us, the majority of us got this right, but we'd like to be better than 56%. The answer is C. But let's go ahead and let's take a look at this one. And they're asking us about the steering committee. And when you look at items A and B, okay, they're really talking more about what the that process of the team, the project management team. Okay, so A and B are good things, but they're really more in the bailiwick of the project management team, and so project development team, I should say. C, it's true the steering committee should be formed, and they do what? They guide and oversee system development and acquisition. That is what they do, okay? Now, D, a steering committee must assess the operations of IT using system performance measurement, common measures. That's really, sort of getting very creative here. as to some things that maybe we would be doing, but that's certainly not something that the steering committee does. That's a little too granular. Steering committee is high level individuals of the organization. Okay, good. So let's take a look at our next module here, and let's start to take a look at the role, excuse me, of IT in business. And we started talking about the IT infrastructure. And guys, you know, some of this stuff is a little, how can I put it? You know, too elementary for us, I think, but let's look at some of these things. Hardware, the computer hardware. I think you know that the computer itself is considered hardware, microprocessors, external hardware devices. Okay, I think you know keyboards, speakers, microphones are external. Let's go ahead though, and let's flashcard infrastructure housing. Okay, since that's not probably something that you typically hear talked about, but although they are not considered hardware, the facilities and the safeguards of those facilities that contain hardware, such as data centers or offices, are part of the broader IT infrastructure. Okay, and of course, we want to have the appropriate advanced security systems to monitor and control access. That's what we mean by infrastructure housing. Okay, coming over to the next page here, and we talk about our network devices. And again, guys, some of this stuff is probably a little too elementary, but let's take a look. We have modems. They connect an organization's network to the internet. Routers, as you probably well know, manage network traffic by connecting devices to form a network. Switches are similar to routers, and they connect and divide devices within a computer network. And then we have gateway. Okay, let's take a look at that. Gateway is a device that acts as an intermediary between different networks. It transforms data from one protocol so that information can flow between networks. And a protocol is a rule or set of rules that governs the way information is transmitted within one of the most common protocols being used is this TCP/IP, and I think you've seen that talked about when you're talking about your IP address and whatnot. So go ahead and flashcard though, because gateway may not be something that just jumps to mind as to what's going on there. Servers, I'm sure you're aware of, and basically most business networks use client-server model within the client. Sends a request to the server and provides a response or executes some action. I think we all hear about print servers quite a bit, so that would implement that action. Firewall is basically a software or a hardware that basically filters things from coming through. You know, those should be aligned with the company's policies and guidelines, et cetera. And firewalls, I'm sure as you know, are to prevent unauthorized access to the organization's information. Okay. Now you come over, and when we talk about the different types of filtering that could be used, firewalls that could be used, let's go ahead and let's flashcard these. Okay, so this does get a little more granular, so I think we need some flashcard. So we take a look. Circuit level gateways control traffic solely based on the source or the origin of the intended destination. Okay. Application level gateways, and when we have application level gateways, also referred to as proxy firewalls. These firewalls typically perform the same function as circuit level, but they also inspect the filter and the contents of the packet based on predefined rules. Stateful multi-layer inspection firewall. I think you see why I'm asking you to flashcard these. I mean, this is not something that I talk about a lot. Combines the feature of circuit level, application level gateways, but also ensures that packets are validated at multiple layers. And then next generation firewalls provide more advanced protection then stateful multi-layer inspection, in addition to observing packets at multiple layers of communication. Next generation firewalls further protect by applying more security to those packets using more sophisticated techniques. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard those very specific discussion of firewalls. And there's one more down here: network address translation. Firewalls convert group of private IP address into a single public IP address prior to communication with other devices outside the company's network. Okay, so flashcard those are very specific terms. I don't think you'll see a lot of that on your exam, but I don't want you to just kind of go in there with no ideas to these different types of firewalls. And then they give us a graphic here that shows the different pieces of the IT infrastructure. Okay, good. Coming down now and taking a look at some of our software applications. I think you know what software is, okay? And then we'll talk about different types of networks here. So when we look at networks, we start to see the definitions that you are probably familiar with, but let's just go ahead and take a little time to look at some of these. I'll give you guys take a second to find the particular page that we're on here for these. Okay, and so when we talk about networks, we have a local area network, and they provide network access to a limited geographic area, such as a home or office. Wide area networks provide access to larger geographic areas, such as cities, regions, countries. Software-defined wide area network, and we can see that these are similar to wide area networks, but they're managed and developed on the cloud using a centralized software package, software application. I think you see this term, we use these kinds of things all the time, right? These days you access Word or whatever, not on your machine, but on somebody's cloud server, right? Okay. And then edge-enabled devices such as edge routers, firewalls support the organization or perimeter of the system. And then virtual private networks.
I think your audio cut out.
Yes, it did.
Okay, guys, looks like I'm back. But since maybe some folks dropped off to maybe take a quick break, why don't we go ahead and go with that energy and take a break right now, and we'll come back at 6:10. Okay, so we'll come back at 6:10. We'll take a break right now, so we'll reconvene at 6:10. Okay. Okay, guys, looks like we're back online. My computer froze up on me or something there. And so I think we're all can hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. So where we left off, I had asked you, we lost the markup now, but I'd asked you to flashcard common networks. And then we're going to come over and we're going to talk here now about mobile technology. And I think we all got a crash course in mobile technology, in 2020, 2019 with COVID, right? So let's go ahead though and take a look at what the text says about that. And mobile technology is going to be often wireless telecommunication that utilizes signals between devices. And basically, the technology moves with users without wires for connectivity, supporting remote network, real time, sustaining businesses that might otherwise collapse during a crisis or temporary inability to meet in person. If that sounds familiar to you, I think you know where that's all coming from. And 4G, 5G, we hear about all these different things, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, you're aware of all those. And then an extension of mobile technology is the Internet of Things, which refers to a class of devices powered by a number of mobile technologies such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular technology. And really, and you can kind of see the example down here. They don't call it that, but they're really kind of, they took out the example. They don't call it that, but they're really kind of talking about, things like Alexis, that type of thing. Okay, that's called the Internet of Things. So you can go ahead and flashcard that because maybe you don't think of all those things as being called that sort of highfalutin term there, the Internet of Things. Okay, good. Now you come over and we start to talk about management information system. Okay, and a management information system consists of different pieces that we're going to be looking at here, which will include the accounting information system, the decision support system, and the executive information system. And we're going to spend a few minutes here talking about the accounting information system. Again, it's still the CPA exam, right? Even though we're kind of in the weeds of IT stuff here, we want to make sure we understand the accounting information system. So you can see here that the accounting information system collects, records, stores accounting information, then compiles that information using accounting rules to report both financial and non-financial information to decision makers in an enterprise. Now, you look at this, and I don't like the tone, the way they wrote this, because it makes it sound like the accounting information system only deals with internal reporting. When you start to look at some of this, you're going to see, hey, it's both internal and external reporting that we're talking about here. So even though the tone is sort of, making it sound like we're worried about decision makers and whatnot, we're also talking about generating our external financial reports. So you can see that a well-designed accounting information system creates an audit trail. Okay, again, when we're being audited, we're not being audited for external reporting. We're being audited for what? External reporting purposes. And the audit trail allows users to look at transactions from source documents into ledgers, into journals, that sort of thing. Okay, now you come over and you start to take a look at the IAS subsystems. Okay, and let's just go ahead and flashcard that these are considered accounting information system subsystems, such as the transaction processing system, and this converts economic events into financial transactions, journal entries, okay, and distributes the information to support daily operation functions. And again, it covers cycles such as sales, conversion, expenditure cycle. Again, what I don't like about this, and guys, you just probably need a flashcard, at a high level. You don't need a flashcard all that detail. Just the headings here is really all you need a flashcard. Okay, just so you understand that these are part of the accounting information system. But when you look at these, you're like, well, we're talking about journal entries. We're talking about journal entries. We're probably talking about what? External reporting purposes, even though they're making it sound like it's for internal purposes. Then we have our financial reporting system or general ledger system. And this basically aggregates daily financial information from the TPS, such as mergers, lawsuits, settlements, etc., for timely regulatory and financial reporting, again, external. So you have what? You basically have the transaction process system really representing what? Journals, and then you have the ledger systems representing ledgers, right? You make entries in a journal, you post them to the ledger. And then the management reporting system, now we're starting to get into something that's going to obviously be more internal, such as variance analysis, cost, volume, profit analysis, etc. Okay, so flashcard, the AIS subsystems, with the first two really leaning more towards external. That third one, is leaning towards internal reporting. Now, functions of the accounting information include collecting, recording, and storing data transactions. We would have specialized journals for certain things. For example, our sales journal, our purchases journal, that sort of thing. General journal, something is not as frequent, and recorded transactions are automatically assigned to the appropriate accounting period and classified by transaction type. Okay, safeguards, transforming data into information through compilation and reporting. Okay, so as transactions are recorded in general ledger accounts, they're updated in real time, allowing for a quick summarization. And the IS system has built-in reporting functions that allow statements to be automatically compiled and generated, etc. Okay, so we have the recording, we have the transformation of the information into financial reports, and then safeguards. Okay, we have input controls. Input controls, common one in accounting information system. If you've used a general ledger software package, I tell my introductory to accounting students nowadays, we don't have to worry about putting a different amount in for a debit and a credit, because most general ledger systems will have what? A input control that won't let a transaction like that go through, right? And then referral integrity maintains referential integrity maintains data security in recorded transactions were stored in databases. Okay, so they give us the sequence of events here, and they give us a chart. And guys, you know, this is a little overkill, don't you think? I mean, I think we know that we have the source document. We'll input that into some sort of journal. The journal then posts to the ledger. You create what? The trial balance from that, and then we can ultimately have our financial reports. And of course, you would want to file any source documents that are relevant. Okay. Okay, I think you know that. I'm not going to sit here and belabor that too much. Okay. Now, decision support systems. Okay, so we've got the information. Now we're going to start to use that information to help us with different types of tools for day-to-day decision making. And you can see that we can have forecasts or modeling. Okay, we can have what if scenarios. Okay, what if scenarios. Decision support systems are important to achieve organizational goals and strategies because we can model what if scenarios. So just flashcard that what if scenario is a part of is an outcome, I should say, or an output of decision support systems. And then what? Artificial intelligence, okay, designed to rely heavily on artificial intelligence, is referred to as an expert system, whereas a traditional DDS is designed to facilitate the decision-making process, okay? And so we could actually mimic knowledge and decision-making abilities. So go ahead and flashcard what they say technically about artificial intelligence. I think we hear a lot about that. You're probably familiar with that, but flashcard both of those. The what if scenario is part of a decision support system in artificial intelligence. Executive information systems, okay, coming over to the next page. And executive information systems provide senior executives with immediate and easy access to information and external information to assist in strategic decision making. So an EIS usually comes in the form of a dashboard that consolidates information, so senior executives can quickly evaluate key statistics. Okay, so just go ahead and flashcard what an executive information system does. And then customer relationship management system. Okay, and let's take a look at some of these. And a CRM is a software that enables organizations to monitor and manage interactions between the organization and its past, current, and potential customers. So go ahead and flashcard that. And when I was reviewing this material today, I was getting annoyed because I feel like I need to put some sort of we talked about VPN earlier. I think I need some sort of VPN on my phone because I'm pretty sure my phone is listening to me. Because every time I talk about something, pretty soon here comes something on Facebook or social media, or I get an email that says, oh, I understand your knee is hurting. You know, well, wait a minute. I didn't tell you my knee was hurting, but they probably heard me talking to somebody about it, right? So, or I mentioned I had a problem with sciatica. I started having a problem with my leg. And I was mentioning sciatica. All of a sudden, I started getting all these emails about sciatica. You know, so I'm sure my phone is listening to me. And so this is the kind of stuff that's going on here. Now we go over and what are some of the objectives of these, you know, listening devices and whatnot. And they're trying to do what? They're trying to attract new customers, okay? Targeted marketing, cross-selling, upselling. Every time I order something, then every time I use my email, they get me to buy some more of the crap that I ordered before, right? They know they got a sucker. And so they go ahead and they keep sending you stuff, right? And it'll allow us to forecast sales leads, et cetera, right? So this is what we're talking about here, this sort of stuff that we're all being bombarded with, okay? Now, you take a look all the way over and we talk about inventory management system, okay? And what these systems do is they track the quantities that we have of various inventory products, and each time we have a sale, it removes an item from inventory, and eventually it'll allow us to what? It'll allow us to automatically have our system order to replenish at any point in time so that we have sort of a just-in-time ordering system, okay? Knowledge management system refers to any IT system that acts as a resource to disseminate knowledge about the organization in a way that supports the organization through supplemental information about products or delivery, and frequently asked questions, is an example of a knowledge management system. And so you can just go ahead and flashcard that. And you probably want to throw in that example as to what we mean by a knowledge management system. Coming over and taking a look at the next page, supply management system, okay, and an integrated supply management system solution unifies business processes beginning with the original supplier and ending with the customer, including activities such as purchasing materials, handling, planning and control, logistics, warehousing, the entire supply chain management, although I'm of the opinion that this has completely fallen apart here because we're having supply chain issues now. And so I think there's a lot of factors that are feeding into that though. But you take a look and a supply chain management system is concerned with 4 important characteristics of every sale: the what, when, and where, and how much, okay? Objectives and functions of the supply management system. And let's go ahead and flashcard these functions and systems of a supply management system. I could see somebody asking you multiple choice questions, something like that. And we have planning. What is our demand forecast? Sourcing, Okay, how are we going to procure what we need? What are going to be our credit terms, the collection, the actual manufacturing, and then the actual delivery of those goods. So the different aspects of the supply management system. Okay, now we come over and supply chain management benefits. And the core benefits include enhanced quality control due to greater transparency and access to data, and reduced cash tied up in inventory because we'll be more predictable with these things. And also, these systems also improve forecasting for procurement, delivery, et cetera. So I think the obvious benefit here is the forecasting aspect, the ability to sort of look and have a better control of when we're going to be paying for items, when we're going to be ordering items, et cetera. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the next page. Not quite the next page yet, but let's look at the next thing here, which is our enterprise resource planning. And they are cross-functional systems that support different business functions and integrate information across departments, accounting, customer management, all of these different things that we've been talking about. So obviously, it's going to be a much more holistic view of the organization. So let's come over, and on the next page, they start to talk about some of the benefits. And when I see benefits and disadvantages, I'm asking you for a flashcard on that, because that is a potential way they like to set up essay questions. What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages? And so let's see what some of the benefits are. The information is stored at a central repository, so that it's just entered once. Acts as a framework for integrating, right? Improving the organization's ability to monitor, etc. Provides vital cross-functional information, improves customer services as information is easily accessed and shared, and allows greater access controls that user privileges of multiple systems can be centrally managed. Now, the obvious disadvantage is going to be some of the time to implement this. They can be completely very cost prohibitive, okay, because it's a lot of software and whatnot. Integration of all business units can be complex, and ERP implementation causes significant changes to business processes, which can lead to errors, user resistance, etc. So when you look at the disadvantages, it's really getting something like this up and running would be the key disadvantage, okay? Okay, good. Come over and let's take a look at an enterprise performance management. Okay, an enterprise performance management systems, also known as business performance management or BPM, or corporate performance management system, are software solutions designed to help executives make strategic decisions. And EPM are useful for analysis of high-level business strategies and translating them into actionable plans. So why don't you just go ahead and flashcard what sort of these enterprise performance management systems are supposed to do. Okay. E-commerce, I think we're all familiar with this. Okay. E-commerce, and the benefit of e-commerce is that it removes overhead costs and creates markets that might not otherwise exist, promotes competitive pricing, allows for product comparison more quickly, and provides parity in information amongst market participants. I'm sure you've used some e-commerce at some point in time where you're able to have access to things that in the past you probably would. Foreign entities, now you can go right online and order different goods and products from these entities. So let's go ahead and take a look. The benefits come with drawbacks such as lag times in shipping, system vulnerability, potential theft of information, etc. So why don't you go ahead and flashcard what some of the risks are versus the benefits. They don't mention this as a risk, but I think there's potential to turn off a customer if they have no way to reach somebody, through completely an e-commerce type of situation. So when we look, they don't mention that here, but maybe I'm just old, and so that kind of stuff bothers me. But when we start to look at some of these things, types of e-commerce, and it's sort of self-explanatory, guy, but let's flashcard at a high level what the specific types of e-commerce are. Okay, and they give us these 5 here on this page. And so let's just go ahead and flashcard at a high level. Okay, but I think it's self-explanatory. Business to business is where one business has e-commerce with another business. Business to consumer is obviously the business allows the customers to order, access, ordering and whatnot directly. Consumer to business is basically allowing e-commerce where the consumers sell their good to service their business. Consumer to consumer, and I think we're aware of things like eBay and whatnot these days, in which you can have interaction between customers. And then government obviously is going to be exchange of goods and services between the government and its citizens. There's a lot of things, for example, payment receipt of taxes, right? I don't know about you, but I, file my taxes online. If I have to pay, I pay online, pay my property tax, all that happens, right, these days online. Okay, good. Flashcard that. And we come over and we start to talk about e-commerce payment methods, okay? And so you start to look at some of these, and, again, I think they got a little full of themselves with some of these graphics, and they start taking up, some pages here with graphics. But let's just take a look at a couple of key things. And when we talk about e-commerce payment methods, okay, sorry guys, for some reason my TV decided to turn itself on because I put my book on top of the remote. Okay, good. Now we come over and we take a look at e-commerce payment methods, and you could have electronic fund transfer. I'm sure you're aware of that. If you buy a house or something, you can have the money sent directly from your bank to the seller's bank, right? Okay, electronic funds transfer. You could also come over and you can have a third party and that's basically when you go and you use your debit card or credit card, and through that debit card, credit card, then what? Then, money's taken from your bank account to not from your bank account. Well, if it's a debit card, it would be from your bank account to the account of whoever the seller is. Okay, and then digital payments is something that we're seeing more of. An example of the digital payments are blockchain networks, which use a distribution ledger for transactions in digital currencies rather than the typical, currency that we're used to. So you can flashcard that's the idea of blockchain. Okay, and on this page, they give us a summary of the management information systems. This may not be a bad flashcard if you don't have it already. In your Becker flashcard, you can copy this page and, shrink this down to flashcard size, and kind of gives you a quick summary of the different management information systems. Okay, let's take a look at IT outsourcing. And again, we're going to really be in a cost benefit type discussion. Okay, what are some of the benefits? What are some of the risks associated with IT outsourcing? So let's go ahead and take a look at cloud computing. And cloud computing is renting storage space, processing power, software, or combination of the three on remote servers from another company rather than buying or building those components. And when you buy software these days, that's what you're doing. You're accessing the application on the cloud, right? You no longer you buying software and downloading it to your machine. Okay. Now, when you take a look at the services that are offered, okay, cloud component services are offered by some companies with large computing infrastructure to either lease excess capacity during off-peak times or use purpose-built infrastructure support to support their customers. Coming over, additional efficiencies exist when a company's data is in one virtual location, even if the company operates at many locations. Okay, so let's take a look at what some of this cloud computing type of things are. And guys, all we're doing here, to be honest with you, is putting terms on things that you use every day. So this isn't really something that's that special anymore. Okay, so infrastructure as a service is also known as hardware as a service, is utilized when an organization outsources any of its servers, storage, hardware, networking service, and networking components to a third parties. Okay, so you can go ahead and flashcard that. Platform as a service allows customers to rent tools for solutions remotely that are to fulfill a specific business purpose, such as pay online platform to sell merchandise. Okay, go ahead and flashcard that. And then I think we're all aware, if you use, an Apple product or something, you are buying what? Software as a service. Okay, software as a service is a business model in which a company delivers the host subscription based on software to customers through licensing or service delivery. Okay, you can go ahead and flashcard that. Okay, now where these things to me as an accountant become more interesting is how do you recognize the revenue associated with providing these services? And they're not, the BEC exam isn't going to get into that, but when we get into FAR, if you're going to be joining me for FAR in the spring, or if you're still, getting ready for your FAR exam you've already taken, this is an example where you'd have to recognize the revenue ratably over time as your, whatever the licensing period is, et cetera. Okay. Now, again, what are some of the advantages versus disadvantages? Okay. And some of the IT outsourcing advantages are lower costs. Okay. Expertise. Okay. You don't have to train experts. You can have them, the company that's providing the service is the expert. Okay. And then what? Resources. We have access to specialized and high quality resources and enhanced focus on the core business. So rather than worrying about IT functions, we spend more time on growing the organization, its strategy, et cetera. So those are some of the advantages, flashcard. Disadvantage of the outsourcing, less control. Okay, can't necessarily control our quality as well. Okay, you may have to get in a queue for access to support. Okay, and sometimes these companies get real stingy with their support, and that can be very annoying, right? And you have to wait for a long time to get through. And I've experienced where first you present your problem to somebody that doesn't know how to fix it, and then they route you to the person that does know how to fix it. So you spend all this time getting to a person that's just going to send you the person, right? Okay, the guy behind the guy. IT outsourcing risks, and let's take a look at some of the risks. And one of the big ones, and you can flashcard these, but one of the big ones is security and privacy practices. Okay, so if you're in a highly regulated entity, you're probably, we have to secure data like a healthcare entity or something, you're probably not going to be as much involved in outsourcing because you want to make sure that you have the adequate controls. Data accessibility, okay, data may be leaked, etc. Okay, that's happened a few times where they hack in to a system and they get a bunch of data that's, for different companies and whatnot. Data disposal. You want to make sure that the data is properly disposed, and that is not something that you can control very much if you outsource. And then vulnerability for attacks. And again, there's been cases like that where they attack not so much a company, but a outsourcing company, and then they end up getting data for various organizations, individuals, and whatnot. Now, there are ways to protect yourself against these things, okay? And to me, one of the most effective things to do is to get one of these SOC reports before you basically engage with one of these outsourcing. The AICPA has provided guidance as to how CPAs can provide assurances around somebody's system so you feel more comfortable that you're not going to run into some of these risks that we're talking about. Okay, now the first one, SOC 1, is basically statement from the statement of system organization controls, and it comes from the statements on standards for attestation engagement. So what happens here, and even though they don't call it out as payroll, this is a good example. Payroll is a good example that most companies outsource their payroll to ADP these days. In fact, ADP is so significant now that they get ahead of the government's Department of Labor's employment reporting numbers. They actually report those ahead, and they tend to be pretty accurate because they handle so much payroll. So they can see that people are adding jobs and whatnot. Companies are adding jobs. Okay, so that's how big they are. And what happens is if you're auditing a company and you're auditing their payroll, it's done by ADP, and ADP doesn't want 52,000 auditors descending on them. So what do? They have an auditor come in and issue an SOC1 report, and the SOC1 report provides assurance that they are processing data correctly. Okay, they have the internal controls to process data correctly. Okay, so there's two types. There's the SOC type 1 report, so SOC1 type 1. And this basically says that the controls have been designed, but there's no testing of those controls. Now, if you got one of those type of reports and you're an auditor, you would have to, that would cover you for your responsibility to understand the control and evaluate the design of the control, but you'd still have to do the maximum amount of substantive testing associated with that, okay? When we start to talk about type 2 SOC1 reports, now not only are we looking at design, but also operating effectiveness. That means that they have also tested the controls. And if you were, as an external auditor, to get that kind of report, then you could support a lower assessed level control risk and then not have to do as much substantive testing, okay? So these reports are really used, in a financial statement auditing context, these SOC1 reports. Now, what about some of these other things that we've been talking about? Let's say you're sitting here and you are a healthcare organization and you're outsourcing your IT. Well, now you're going to want some more robust controls that are going to ensure the privacy over that data, et cetera, right? And so now we take a look in SOC2 reports, okay? And they are going to help us with the availability, integrity, availability, privacy of data. There are two types of SOC2 reports. Type 1 report, management's explanation or description of a given service company system, okay, as well as suitability control design. Type 2 also gives the explanation, but it also would look at the operating effectiveness. Okay, so you'd probably want to do this if you're more worried about the integrity, availability, and privacy, and you get that kind of report. Now you're more comfortable sharing some of your data. You're not worried as much about some of those risks that we talked about. And so you can go ahead and flashcard. And then maybe if we don't have as much sophistication, we would use an SOC3 report, and that's going to provide us much more explanation as to what's going on with these, and we don't have the expertise to use an SOC2 report. So SOC1 really is a financial statement. When we start getting into some of these issues we've been talking about, integrity, availability, processing of data, you know, when I looked at this, I asked myself, why didn't the Affordable Care Act get this kind of report when they first went online? Because there was no reason for that system to have crashed the way it did when it first went online. It just created some political fodder to those that were not in favor of the Affordable Care Act, and they could have avoided some of that by getting these type of engagements. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at a couple questions here. Let me go ahead and put the poll up. Okay, guys, we're coming up on 2 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and let's just take a look at this question. And yeah, okay, not too bad. I mean, some of this stuff gets a bit overwhelming, I know, and we're going to have to memorize some flashcards for a lot of this stuff, but most of us got this right, 60% of us anyway. The answer is C. Now, when you look at, you know, some of these choices, you know, you want to think about, well, we're talking about electronic fund transfer. Well, if it's an electronic fund transfer, then there's probably what? Not a whole lot of documents associated with that. It's electronic. Okay, so allowing offsite storage for documents, I mean, there probably aren't really source documents that are even maybe going to be available with electronic fund transferring. Therefore, we don't have what? Improvement in audit trail. We probably have what? Less of an audit trail. We don't have checks, that sort of thing. Okay, so you could eliminate A and D here just with the notion that we're talking about electronic. And then, you know, creation of self-monitoring access controls. I don't think anybody picked that, and I don't even know what that means. C, reduction of frequency of data entry errors. What happens? Well, you go through and you set up this transfer, and it's not like it has to have a check that then has to be put in by somebody else. So the check is processed, then moves through. When they get the check, they have to enter it. It just all happens electronically, right? And so that would be an advantage. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at question 2. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this question quickly here because it looks like most of us have had a chance to try this one. So we're a little over a minute there on that one, which is good. And the enterprise resource system, which almost everybody got right, is integrating data from all aspects, right? And we talked about that. One person chose D, maybe you got the E confused for enterprise with executive. That was to allow executives to make various decisions, right? It was an executive information system. Okay, good. So let's just go ahead and let's take a look at our next module here, which is data analytics. Now, quick comment about data analytics. I know that you keep hearing it's coming, and the CPA exam is going to be a big deal. We're talking more 2024, where we really start getting into the more technical aspects of data analytics, and that's probably going to hit the auditing exam. The BEC exam is going away, as you well know. Did I talk to you about that? The BEC exam, the last BEC exam will be be offered in December 2023. Okay, so that's a long way off for you guys. I think you will clearly be done with this, but I'm also putting that out there as a motivation to get this thing done, because when you pass the BEC exam, then if you're still testing in 2024, you will still need to take the core parts of the exam, which is the financial section, the audit section, and what is basically going to be a tax section. But you won't have to take one of the specialized areas, the business accounting and reporting, the information system, the tax compliance specialization. You will be waived having to take one of those. So we're recommending here that you get BEC out of the way as quickly as possible. In fact, I already have a proposal on the table to GGU to offer BEC more frequently here as we head into 2024, so we can get as many of our students here at GGU through that BEC exam before the change comes. So again, motivation to get BEC out of the way.
So Professor, just real quick, so after the change is made, did you say there will be actually 2 tax exams?
There'll be a section that kind of just generally tax, but then there'll be 3 specializations. One is more like for a financial reporting aspect, and that there's that section. So it'll kind of be more specialized beyond what is in the core requirements of FAR right now. And then there'll be a tax compliance and planning section, which is going to get not so much in the more to the planning thing. So not so much just, what are the tax laws like we have currently in the regulation exam, but focusing more on tax planning, that sort of thing for the individuals that are going to go into that. And then there'll be a information security section that you would choose one of those 3. So you'll still have to take tax like you do with the regulation to answer your question, but there'll also be a more specialized tax piece that you can choose to take if you want to. And what I'm saying is that if you pass BEC before 2024, you don't have to choose that 3rd specialization part.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So we're recommending that you get that out of the way. Some people are, I like the specialization parts. Well, you never want to be in the, what do they call that? The beta of something. Which, sometimes there's some bugs as they work that stuff out. So I would recommend getting BEC out of the way. I'm probably wasting time here talking about this because you're going to have this thing done well before 2024 anyway. So, okay. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look at, and so where I was going with all that. So data analytics at this point, you're going to see this is highly definitional. We're going to flashcard the heck out of this so that we just understand what some of the key definitions are here. Okay, starting with the term big data refers to the corporate accumulation of massive amounts of data for analysis. Now, we always talk about it in the terms of the massive amounts of data that's being collected and whatnot. But what's really driving this phenomenon is the speed at which we can process all this data now. That's what's making it worthwhile to accumulate all this data, because it can be processed quickly and be used for different decisions. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. So as I mentioned, we start getting into some definitions here pretty quickly, and we start talking about the volume of data. And I'm sure that that you can kind of surmise that volume is the size of the data, how many data points there are, what is the like I said, it could be a factor of size, the amount of points that we can look at. For example, data can be in plain text, can be transmitted more quickly and requires less storage than data with video or audio files. And I think we're all familiar with that. Okay, but go ahead and flashcard some of the volume considerations. Okay, we flashcard all these definitions, guys. Velocity refers to the speed of which we can accumulate and process the data. Okay, and we're seeing obviously that is increasing significantly now. Flashcard that definition. Variety of the data, okay, and there is refers to the range of data types, and the data can be structured data, okay, it can be semi-structured, and then it can be unstructured. And obviously what structured data is going to be more useful for analysis, but flashcard what we mean by the variety of data and the categories there. Actually, you can kind of see that up in the whole definition. So if you want to, you can just flashcard that whole definition there. And then they talk about structured versus semi-structured versus unstructured. Veracity of the data, guys, is a fancy way of saying what? The reliability of the data, okay? And then the value of the data is what sort of insights can it yield for us, okay? So go ahead and flashcard these different terms: volume, velocity, variety, three types of variety: the veracities, the integrity of the data, the reliability of the data, and the value is how useful it is in helping us to make the decisions that we need to. Now we come over and we take a look at some of the governance issues. Okay, and these are pretty important considerations. So I do want you to flashcard these. So what happens as you start to accumulate lots of data? There are ethical and legal concerns as to how you're holding that data, and you would want to provide guides on how sensitive data should be captured, maintained, et cetera. So if you're gathering all this data potentially on individuals and whatnot, well, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes along with that. Okay, that also gets into the notion of confidentiality. Okay, so confidentiality, employee records, bank records, all this stuff. So it's one thing to collect the data; it's another thing to consider some of these ethical confidentiality issues. You know, you're collecting data that has copyright requirements. What about that? Patent. Okay, just flashcard the confidentiality concerns, and then trademarks, trade secrets. Okay, again, you start to accumulate some of this data that they're talking about here that has a confidentiality consideration. Privacy. What happens here? Organizations like healthcare organizations are regulated, okay, by the state, by the federal acts, HIPAA, et cetera. So you need to consider those sort of privacy issues as well, okay? And then you look at some of the big data ethics, and you can see here organizations should make sure authorized personnel. And I find that interesting because that almost sounds like a CPA exam question. Authorized personnel are granted minimum level access. That's kind of almost sounds like something that they would say, you know, which of the following would not be a consideration? And you would think, oh yeah, we don't want to provide minimum level. Yeah, you do. You want to provide minimum level, even though the individuals are authorized. What is the minimum level of data they need to perform their job function? So go ahead and flashcard that. That is an ethical consideration. Okay, and then an organization's governance program should consider all of these issues that we've sort of been talking about here, and that's really at you know, the role of the chief privacy officer, corporate compliance officer, that sort of thing. You can flashcard those individuals. Okay. All right, good. Data management, okay? And we're going to start to talk about some things that you maybe have studied in some of your other courses, the data analytics course, which many of you have probably taken or are taking, will take soon. And it's basically talking about relational databases. You have different tables where you're storing the data, and how can you perform queries that will allow you to compare data that's maybe stored in one table, one database, with information that's stored in another table. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at here. And we start to look at this notion of storing data in relational databases. Okay, and let's just go ahead and take a look. And you can see that in many cases, we store data in relational databases, and it allows data to be stored in different tables, and the tables are linked through relationships using field keys. Okay, so when we look at these relational databases, we want to understand different concepts, starting with tables. Okay, let's just go ahead and understand tables are organizational structures within relational databases that establish columns and rows of information. Guys, just picture what? A Excel spreadsheet, right? Okay, now within those spreadsheets, right, within those tables, we have columns, okay, and the columns are also called, and let's just go ahead and flashcard these things, okay, are also called columns. Okay, they're the columns, the headers. For example, an attribute column in a customer table would be the last name. Then we have, okay, and you can see why I'm using the Excel analogy here. Flashcard, all of these, I don't know why I changed the color, the same, still a flashcard, okay, are rows, okay, and the rows are records with a table in the relational database. So what would happen, a customer table would provide certain additional information about a single customer, maybe things they've ordered, that sort of thing, okay. Fields are the intersection of the column and row in which data is entered. Okay, so this data is entered inside of a field. And then you have data types. Okay, so you can have a numerical, you can have a character, a set of characters, a single character, etc. Okay, flashcard that definition of data types. Okay, now let's take a look at database keys. Okay, and I'm going to ask you for a separate flashcard. Now you got some of those things flashcard, which I think you probably knew some of those things already, but flashcard those, and then let's talk about database keys. And we have two main types of keys. We have primary keys and foreign keys. Now, primary keys are unique identifiers for a specific row within a table and are made up of one or more attribute. Okay, so for example, maybe we have the name of the individual as a primary key. A foreign key or attribute keys in one table are also primary keys in another table. For example, customer ID may be a primary key in the customer table. However, it is a foreign key in the sales table. Okay, so flashcard that we have what? Primary keys and we have foreign keys, and flashcard this notion that a primary key can be primary in one table and a foreign key in another. Now, when we look at the relationships, okay, relationships results from a link between a primary key in one table and a foreign key in another table. That's what we mean by relationships. So you can see that we have what? In our customer key, in our customer table, I should say, the account number is a primary key, but in the what? In the orders table, the account number is a foreign key. Okay, and then you can have the different types of orders, and you can create in a relational database as to what? As to what the customer ordered. Okay, you could go ahead and have the account number as a foreign key in shipments. And what they do with these relational databases is they know what locations are ordering certain things, and then they can cut down on shipping time as they move the stuff closer and closer to you. That's why you almost have the thing with Amazon these days. You order something, and as soon as you're done pressing order, the thing's being dropped at your door, because they've set it up already that they know that you order this thing more frequently. And I've had the experience where I was ordering kumquats over Amazon. I was on a kumquat kick for a while. Kumquat is like a small orange. And the first time I ordered it, took a while. The second time I ordered it was a little shorter. The third time, like I said, I ordered it, it was there, because they know, okay, this guy's ordering this, and they start getting the thing closer and closer to you. So you do all these things through these relational databases. You know, these things have been around for a long time, these sort of analysis. But as I've mentioned, you know, I was on an assignment at the GAO where we were looking to see for housing agencies where there were listing of findings about certain things in their single audit reports, okay, which was in one database maintained by Customs. We compared the nature of those findings to the scores that HUD, a different agency in the federal government that manages housing agencies, the scores that they were giving them for their financial performance. So we were looking to see, do we see problems listed in the single audit report, while the housing agency, while the Department of Housing and Urban Development is giving them a good score in their financial management. And we found like some 300 housing agencies that were getting a good financial score, Meanwhile, they were having poor financial controls listed in their single audit report. They were having bounced checks listed as a liability in their financial statements. So these kinds of relational discussions have been around for a long time, but when we put it in the context of data analytics, now it's all being amplified by the ability to use these processing programs that allow you to do this kind of stuff. Okay, good. Now you come over, and anytime you're going to be dealing with data like this, you need a data dictionary, okay? And it's also referred to as metadata, and it provides information about the data, okay, the type of data, etc. Before you do these type of analysis, you've got to have a data dictionary that's going to allow you to be able to manipulate that data in a manner that you want to. Okay. Now, what happens is you will then look at different database views. Okay. And there is a logical view. Logical view is basically how the individual who's interfacing with that data will see it. The physical database view is how it is actually physically stored. Okay, now of course you're probably going to be, seeing this much more, but you should know the difference between the logical database view and the physical database view. And then extracting data is typically done via query tools, and we're going to start to talk about some of these here in a minute. Most commonly using programming language that are structured query language, SQL. And what's interesting about SQL is it supposedly, better you than me, uses easy to understand commands so that you can, basically set up these queries using words instead of code. Okay, so you can go ahead and flashcard what we mean by SQL, and then they give us an example query, and where we say we write select customer first name from customer table, select customer name from last name from customer table, where customer name equals Betty, etc. So you can use those terms. Okay, good. Now, what happens? We're going to go through the different processes here, okay? And so we're going to extract, transform, and load, okay? Which is essentially the process in which the data is captured from its sources and transferred to the organization so that it can be further analyzed. And they call that ETL, okay? So go ahead and flashcard what we mean by ETL. And let's talk about some of these things. Let's start with data extraction. Okay, it can take the form of an automated process, manual extraction, etc. Okay, now some of these things that we're about to talk about they're very important. It sounds like a yawn. Who cares? If you don't do a good job with some of these things, extracting, transforming, and loading the data, you're going to have an oh shit moment where you are sitting there and you realize you don't have complete data, or you didn't get the correct data, or you have out-of-date data, or the data hasn't been updated, okay, and you're getting ready to issue your report, whatever it is, and you run into something like this, okay? So it's important to do these things correctly up front, okay? So let's just go ahead and take a look, starting with data identification. And the first step is to understand the issue the business is trying to address to ensure the data request has a proper scope to resolve it. Okay, you got to know what is the best data that is going to answer the question. Okay, obtaining the data, okay, and how you request that data. And when you request the data, the recipient must be provided with full details on what is needed, including the data file type, format, etc., time period. All of these things, you have to be very careful with. You can use automated extraction. Automated extraction is basically you use some sort of application programming interface The one that we used to use in GAO was called IDEA. And IDEA, and I forget what IDEA stands for, it's actually an acronym, is where you can go in and you interface with the client system and essentially extracts whatever data you want out of the client system, and then you can begin to work with that information. Or if you're doing an internal analysis out of your own system, being an auditor, I tend to talk about clients, but it could be your own system that you're trying to extract that data from. Okay, if you do manual extraction, you may have to use specialized data mining software or write a customized query to obtain that data. That's what we mean by manual. We don't mean that you're pulling the data and typing it off of a, hard copy thing into using some other process other than a specialized an application programming interface. Okay, now you come over and transforming the data. Okay, and once one of the most time consuming is transforming the data in the ETL process, and transforming it. This step entails taking the often unstructured raw data, cleaning it, manipulating it, and validating it. So let's understand, go ahead and flashcard what transforming the data involves, which is cleaning it, manipulating it, and validating it. But let's go ahead then and start to look more closely at what some of these steps entail, or some of these things entail. Cleaning the data, okay, after you extract it, knowing what attributes are needed and formatting of those attributes. Duplicate data points, remove inaccurate data, account for outliers, address missing fields, okay? The key, the best thing there to make sure that the data is complete is to do some sort of reconciliation. So if you know, for example, what we did when we were trying to compare HUD's records to single audit information, the housing agency had a unique identifier, and that was contained both in their single audit report and in HUD's system. Well, then you just match those and you make sure that there's no missing information in the HUD system for a housing agency, or you make sure that there's no situation where there isn't a single audit report for a housing agency, or if there is something missing, why? What's going on? And we found that there were some housing agencies that didn't have single audit reports because they didn't meet the reporting threshold. And so we were able to, consider that as part of our analysis, et cetera, right? Okay, so you would need to do those kind of things. Remove unnecessary attributes. That's going to speed your analysis. Ensure complete data by performing spot checks. So after you do the analysis, make sure nothing got dropped in the analysis. Do some spot checks. Okay. Remove sensitive information if it's not needed. Okay. And then ensure data points are properly formatted using trimming tools, etc. Okay, so that's all cleaning the data. Why don't you go ahead and flashcard at a high level what some of those things are. Then once you have that data clean, then you can validate the data. Okay, so make sure the data is not lost or modified in the cleaning process. Okay, so you can go ahead and flashcard that, what you're trying to achieve there. And then of course you start to manipulate that data, as we have mentioned. And so when you go and you manipulate the data that has been cleaned, it can be supplemented or enhanced or otherwise manipulated in a way that adds value to the existing data points. So you can see that you can go ahead and append demographic, socioeconomic data, create new variables that classify, categorize existing variables. Okay, so you can play with that data accordingly to manipulate it for whatever your particular purposes are. Okay, then you're going to load the data. Okay, and when you load the data into a software program for analysis, or to a data storage location. I think most of the time we tend to think of data analytics as loading it into some sort of ability to do an analysis, but notice here that they talk to us quite a bit more about the data storage. Okay, so let's take a look at the different types of data storage and ways of storing the data. And you can have operational data storage, and it's a repository of transactional data from multiple sources that is often a source for a data warehouse. Transactional data captures could be related to operational activities such as customer orders, sales, etc. Okay. You can also have a data warehouse. And when we look at data warehouses are very large data repositories that are centralized and utilized for reporting and analysis rather than transaction purposes. So the data is just sort of sitting there, and probably when you're deciding to do some sort of analysis, you're saying, well, what data do we have available in the data warehouse that we can use for that analysis? Okay. When you look at data mart, is much like a data warehouse, but it is more focused on specific purposes such as marketing, etc. So, we're basically putting, you're now, instead of at Safeway's warehouse where they may have stuff all over the place, you're now at the Safeway store where you go to the milk department if you're interested in milk, right? Okay. And then data lake is a data repository similar to a data warehouse, but it contains both structured and unstructured data. The data is probably sitting in its raw format. Okay, now considerations for our data storage requirements. We have to make sure that we have entity integrity. So primary keys must be utilized for a database to establish and maintain integrity. Referential integrity, because databases are relational in nature to a primary key in another table and relate to a foreign key. Okay, so we have to maintain that integrity. Okay, flashcard, the definition of entity integrity versus referential integrity, dealing with what? The primary key versus the foreign key, right? Okay. They give us this graphic here. I don't think that we need to review that graphic. Now, let's take a look at data storage attributes. Okay, and the relevance means how useful is it for helping us to answer whatever question is that we're trying to answer. Okay, and elements that could be included or excluded. Okay, again, if you include elements of the data that aren't particularly relevant to the decision, then that's going to slow down your processing, right? Okay, so you want to try to, exclude those kind of things. And relationships between elements include validity, completeness, and accuracy. Validity pertains to the data being entered in a correct manner. Okay, completeness simply means no required data is missing. Accuracy means that the data is entered as true, and just if anything can be, is free from error. Okay, and you can go ahead and flashcard the data storage attributes, relevance at a high level, elements to be included and excluded, and relationships. Types of loading, you can do a initial full load. Okay, and that's usually what will be the case. And then if there are changes, you could just change the things that have changed into the data repository, or full, fresh, essentially loading. When there are changes, you just go ahead and just reload all of the data again. Okay. Once the data has been loaded, then again, we need to make sure that we have load verification. In other words, nothing was lost in the loading. Okay. All right. Now we start to talk about here the different types of data analytics. Again, guys, very definitional stuff. And then we're going to talk about different ways of visualizing these different types of data analytics that can be done. Okay, so data analytics is taking raw data, identifying trends, and transforming that knowledge into insights to solve. And we talk about business problems, but again, government problems. A lot of problems can be solved using these different data analytic techniques that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so we come over and we start to see some of these, and we have descriptive analysis. Okay, and descriptive analysis indicates what has happened, right? What has happened. Okay, common descriptive analytical techniques include observing summary statistics, okay, sorting the data into relevant ranges, analyzing the data, age, location, income, etc. Okay, diagnostic analytics reveal why something happened. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard these guys. The descriptive analysis, what that means. Diagnostic analysis tells us why something happened. For example, performing some sort of correlation. We talked about correlation earlier between two attributes. Okay, what is the cause and effect? Is these things positively correlated, uncorrelated, negatively correlated? Okay, predictive analysis using regression analysis to provide a mathematical model. Okay, between a dependent variable and an independent variable, sales versus income. Some of the things that we talked about in our economics discussion. Okay, so that's a predictive analysis using regression analysis for that. Coming over and taking a look at prescriptive analysis. And prescriptive analysis basically tells us how to achieve the desired result that we're looking for a particular desired outcome. Okay, and so go ahead and flashcard that definition and include on that flashcard that prescriptive analysis includes artificial intelligence, machine learning, scenario what if analysis are examples of prescriptive analysis. And then they give us some examples here, but I think those are pretty self-explanatory, and you have the flashcards on those. Okay. Now, how can we use these data analytics? And we can use them for marketing activity analysis, I should say. Flashcard that. Managerial and operational analytics. Risk compliance analytics. Risk and compliance analytics. This is an area where I keep talking to some of my colleagues. I call them colleagues, they're former students, that are now working as partners and whatnot in CPA firms and doing compliance testing. So when an entity receives so much federal financial assistance, there's certain compliance testing that you have to do. For example, if an individual has certain income levels, then they wouldn't be allowed to participate in, say, a federal government program. Well, auditors are required to do compliance testing around that. And I keep hearing them saying, well, we're using sampling techniques for that. And I keep wondering, why couldn't you do an entire population testing using some of these data analytic techniques, the relation being what? The income level or the age of the person, whatever, versus what? Versus their participation in that program. And if you have those sort of relational databases, you could do 100% testing on these kind of things. And I think that there should be some motivation of some of these audit organizations to develop that type of analytics. But when I talk to some of my colleagues and I describe that to them, they kind of are sitting there tuning out, like, okay, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I don't know why they wouldn't do more of that. But these are the kinds of things that type of analytics that you could do. Financial analytics, okay, monitor financial performance, and then audit analytics. And we are required to do analytical procedures, it's the planning phase. And so again, these are greatly enhanced by data analytics that allow you to assess risk, allow you to determine, whatever your materiality thresholds need to be, those sort of things. So flashcard the nature of the types of these analytics, and then tax analytics. They say government entities, tax accountants can use these for tax planning purposes is probably an area that's actually done. There's quite a bit of that being done now. Okay, good. Now let's talk about visualizations. Okay, and there are a couple of types of data. We could talk about qualitative data. Qualitative data tends to be non-numerical, okay, in nature. I just want you to flashcard, high level qualitative data is non-numerical. I'm not going to read the rest of that because at some point it's like, oh brother, what are they talking about here? So just flashcard qualitative data is non-numerical. Quantitative data, I think, I'm asking to flashcard this. It's almost kind of silly to ask you to flashcard it because quantitative data is numerical in nature. Okay. Now, when we start to talk about types of visualization, okay, line charts. And this stuff, guys, is pretty useful to you while you're still a student, okay? But as you move forward in your career, I mean, really thinking about how you're going to visualize things, okay, are the types of things that get you noticed by senior management, boards of directors, because they like that chart. Oh, that was a beautiful chart. I really understood what you were trying to communicate because you did a good job with that graphic. So don't take this lightly. This is pretty important stuff. Okay, so line charts are best used when showing trends over time. Okay, flashcard that. Okay. Column charts are effective at showing comparisons. Flashcard that. Okay, I don't have to allow a whole lot to stay there. Stacked column charts are similar to column charts, but each column is stratified to show additional details. Okay, so if you want to show comparisons over time for these columns, for example, they show us this. Now, the only problem I have with this thing is they sit here and, what are these different things? They don't tell me what the green is versus the light blue versus the red versus the dark blue. So here they're talking about data visualization, and then they don't do a real good job in making clear what is this, different product lines or what. Okay, so again, it is important that you have the appropriate legend with these things, right? So the person knows, well, the blue is this, the green is that, which they did not do here. Okay, and then scatter plots. Okay, when you have scatter plots, demonstrate relationships between two variables, the X and Y value, okay? And scatter plots are good when you're talking about regression analysis. I mean, that's really what regression analysis is telling you is what is the cause and effect of these different things, right? And so you might use a scatter plot to show what's happening with some sort of regression analysis. Okay, flashcard that. Did I tell you to flashcard scattered columns? Yeah. Get scattered, stacked, I should say, column charts. Okay, and then you come over box plots. Okay, and box plots are graphical display that show upper and lower extremes. Flashcard that. There's box plots. I don't know that I want to see too much box plots. They're, to me, start to get a little bit too much. Okay, but a dot plot, okay, is a two-dimensional matching of observations. Flashcard that. Some of these things start to get a little too much. Geographic map, yeah. We see these a lot if you're kind of a political junkie and you're watching, the election results. They always show you county by county, what's happening, what's red, what's blue, where votes are still coming in, that kind of stuff. So those are pretty popular. And then pie charts, okay? Pie charts show respective portions of a whole, obviously. I don't think you needed to come to class tonight to know that. but flashcard it in case somebody says to you, when would you use a pie chart? And you're sitting there on the exam and you're having trouble, remembering what's going on. So, okay. Okay, good. So, and pyramids, I guess we're not done with these yet. They're going to be pretty comprehensive. Okay, understanding the foundations or building blocks of something. Okay, the pyramid. Flow charts will help you diagram a process. Okay, and waterfall shows the cumulative effect of a series of data points that make up a whole. Okay, and directional charts highlight key events or milestones over time. Flashcard that. Okay, now we take a look in consideration for design. Okay, let's go ahead and flashcard some of these considerations at a high level. Scale appropriately, use legends appropriately, like they didn't do in that one that I was showing you. Avoid bias, use consistent time periods, use colors, use clear and easy to read titles and labels. Okay, and so those are good things to keep in mind. I would always get annoyed we'd have what we call report review when I was in the GAO, and everybody's got their idea, as to how something should be visualized, and so sometimes you got to be patient with what it is that you're doing when you're putting together these visualizations, and to avoid any sort of distortion and use the appropriate colors and the appropriate techniques that we have flashcarded. Okay, all right, good. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at a couple of questions for the data analytics discussion. Assuming I can find the poll. Okay, looks like most of us have had a chance to look at this one, and yeah, 90% of us got it correct. Again, you can see that this is largely definitional stuff here. They're talking about what variety of data, both using numbers, images, videos. That's all variety of data, right? Okay, good. let's go ahead and look at our next question. Okay, it looks like most of us have had a chance to try this one, and just about everybody got it correct. This is an example of descriptive analysis. We're just looking at sales by region. They're not sitting there saying, therefore, we should do this or focus that, or this is the reason that this happened. It's simply doing what? Describing the sales by a geographic. So the answer here is D. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop there because I cannot get through module 5 in the time that's left, and I don't like to get halfway through a module, so I'm going to adjourn class now. A couple things. Lots of flashcards, guys. I think you saw that, right? So you've got a ton of flashcard stuff that you're going to have to put the time in with. And it's important because this all together accumulates 10 points. And I often hear students say, wow, I didn't think there was going to be that much IT stuff on the exam. And that's an easy trap to fall into because we're putting it in the last chapter, right? And we're kind of doing it here at the end. Meanwhile, you will see lots of questions, and they should be fairly straightforward because you've seen they are definitional in nature, right? There's not a whole lot of analytics and what you have to do to, no pun intended on the data analytics stuff, but there's not a lot of analysis, I should say, you have to do computations or anything like that, but you do have to know the definitions. So make sure you're either getting those flashcards out of your pre-made flashcard or you're making the ones that I've asked you if there isn't something there that covers that. We will finish chapter 6 next time, and with some luck, we may even be able to start in on our final review. Certainly our last meeting session, we will focus on the final review. So make sure you've got that final review book. You're digging that out wherever you may be stuck at, because we may get into it next time, and we'll definitely get into it the time after that. Okay. Okay, guys, have a good rest of the evening. Thanks.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, should I stop the recording or?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Let me stop the recording, Michael, and then we'll, whatever you need on question. And I think I'm